Hey everyone, welcome back. So if you remember right, we did an eval on the Yeswelder 135. So Yeswelder really liked that review, but they have a new version of that welder. So they sent it out for us to eval it, make a new video on it, and let me know what we think of it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of mash up that review with a topic that seems like everybody on the channel seems to like, and that's exhaust pipe. Exhaust pipe videos are going crazy right now, so it seems like everybody's looking for a good way to do that. I don't want to say inexpensively, but you know, fairly reasonable. So here's what we're going to do today. Now, since the machine is a multi-process TIG, MIG, stick, and if you remember right, when we did the plain 135, we didn't do anything on a TIG. Well, this time we're going to fix that. So we're going to weld some of the exhaust pipe with some flux core. You always got to watch what you have plugged in. We're going to do some TIG. Now this is a scratch start or lift TIG, however you want to talk about it, right? There's no pedal. And then we're going to step out on the edge a little bit and we're going to stick weld. Now I'll be the first to tell you, I can do some TIG and I can do some flux core. I don't do a whole lot of stick welding, but I think we'll still make it happen. All right, so I don't know if you remember the other review. I'll leave a link up somewhere up here for that, but this model now has this really nice digital display. You don't have two different buttons or two different dials where you do selecting, and it does a really nice job of selecting the modes, whether you're in stick, lift TIG, or flux core. Really nice job dialing everything in. If you want to select your actual voltage, there's a little button hidden under here for parameters. You can select all your voltages for your flux core. Now for your stick, you can do arc force and hot start if you want to start hotter or not. Now it's your standard flux core welder or any welder. Small little window in here, takes you a 1 pound spool. Now this is running 30 thou wire 030. And I have several videos out there if you really want to dig into the feeders and everything. But pretty much a pretty compact little unit. Like I said, it came with, you know, the stinger for stick welding, the torch for TIG, and then the MIG gun. Now one thing with the TIG torch is you don't have a foot pedal. So like the Miller I've got, you got a foot pedal. For this, it's a scratch start, and we'll talk more about how you operate without the foot pedal here in a minute. Alright, so let's dig into this exhaust pipe and let's see what it'll do. Now typically I would want to use wire with gas because I don't have to clean no slag off. But for the price of this unit, I mean, you could be doing exhaust pipe, putting floors in your vehicles, throwing it in the back of your truck for light duty stuff. I mean, it'll do a lot of stuff for you for a little bit of no money. So let's see how it does on this. So Yeswelder did send some of their TIG rod, some 3/32 arc rods, tungsten for the TIG, and collet bodies and some cups. Now one thing I would always suggest, if you do any kind of welding, I would use some kind of anti-spatter spray. I like my rock mount anti-spatter spray, right? And I typically will just give the work surface a good wipe down. And then that way, or the rarity that I'm using stick, it doesn't mar up the weld table too much. Now if you're welding this under a vehicle, you know, maybe not so much, but if you're welding on a work surface, it definitely helps. Now from a typical MIG standpoint, the gun is no different. It actually uses the same gun if you're using gas or not. Right? So we did some test welds with it. Typical nozzle, and especially when you're using flux core, I would always suggest just give it just a little spray of the anti-spatter And this has got to be the same gun they use with gas, because you can see there's gas ports around the nozzle. So if we just come over here and go down to flux core, it's no different than any other, right? If you want, depending on how much wire feed you want. Now we're running some pretty thin tubing, so, and you'll play with your settings to figure that out. And if you need some help with that, well, I'll put a link in the bottom on how we figure up the settings on everything. It's pretty easy. You just got to go through some basic mathing, and then, well, it works out pretty quick. Alright, so I've already wiped these down with some acetone. Got all the stickers off of it and everything. If you want to weld with the stickers, weld with the stickers on. But she's all cleaned up. She's all good to go. One joint at a time. So we'll weld some of this on each process. Now I'm not going to sand the outside of this, but you'll see that when we get into the TIG welding, by not sanding it's going to make it a little dirty looking. How do you tell you're old when you're old? Well, you need some different glasses. When your seers ain't seeing properly, definitely helps. And if you'd ever need any gear or anything, there's also information on the channel on different gear and stuff like that. Or reach out to me. Always more than willing to talk to everybody about it. Alright, so very simple. We're just going to lay a couple quick beads here and see how this Flux 135 does just on exhaust pipe. And the reason why I like using gas is you have to clean off any of the slag. And you just got to play with your settings a little bit until they clean up. So, took off a little too fast there in the beginning. So, let's slow down just a little bit. These little V's work out great for stuff like that. So start it and just kind of sit for a second. Now if you're using this to build fences in the back 40 or the backyard or something like that, this thing's perfect for that. A little 110, a little flux core. Come back, clean it up with the wire wheel when you're all done. Pretty easy peasy. Alright, so let's see how this does with the TIG. Now Yeswelder sends you this little diagram here that says depending on what you're using, on which ports you want to actually use. Right, so we was in the flux core, so your ground lead was here, and this will never change where your gun is plugged into. But for lift TIG, you're going to have your gun in this last port, and your ground is going to stay here. So we are going to grab the lead for the TIG torch. Now I've already got the gas plumbed in, and we'll turn that on. So when you open the valve, you see the ball will pop up, and typically whatever size cup you're using, like this is a 9, I would typically use about 2 times the cup size for gas. Just make sure on this that you don't have a foot pedal, that you turn it off every time, otherwise you're going to end up just bleeding out all your gas. Now we'll come over here and we'll say we are in lift TIG. Alright, so I like wearing a thinner glove for TIG welding because I can feel things a lot better. Now this is a scratch start, so if you're running a high frequency start, when you hit the pedal, you're not touching purposely. So with the scratch start or lift arc, you're going to kind of strike it a little bit to get it to light. So we're going to turn the gas on. I'm going to go up just a little bit. I'm going to go up to 60 amp. Now I know this weld's going to look dirty because I didn't sand the pipe first. And one thing you can do is just practice pushing the puddle without filler rod. I don't like using, this is a 3/32 rod. I don't like using it on this big material, on this real thin stuff like this. I typically would use like an 045 or a 16th. That is some ugly weld, but that's not the machine. That's all me. So, like I said, that's an ugly weld. Let me grab a little thinner rod. Then just walk the edge, that overlap of the pipe. And since you don't have a pedal, if it starts getting hot, that just means you need to speed up a little bit. Well, you can't back off with the scratch start. It's a little better weld. Once again, it's never going to be a nice, pristine, unless you sand out all of the impurities. It definitely looks better than that garbage. Alright, so now let's set this up for stick welding. So we know we're not going to be using the TIG torch, so that can come out. We'll turn the gas off before we use all that. So we use our little diagram here, and it says the stinger now needs to go in the same exact spot that the torch was. Now I'll be the first to tell you, I do very little stick welding. So the odds of these looking good are going to be rare. Alright, and we're going to come over here to mode. We're going to say stick. Now it's about 50,000 wall, so I'm on 57. Arc force, never use it, so if you're used to stick welding and you can tell me more about arc force, please do. I did turn up the hot start, so I know that 3/32 rod is going to be way too thick for that. Now maybe you're a better stick hand than I, which you don't have to be very good to be better than I am on stick. I have some of these 16th electrodes, and we're going to use these. Once again, if you're better at stick, use whatever size you can use. But the fact that you can flux core, TIG, and stick with this little unit, I'll let you know what the price is at the end of all this. So let's see how this little dude does. No laughing if I stick it. Stick, get it? Now remember, when you get that stinger plugged in, everything is hot right now. So if you touch that or set that stinger down on the table, you are going to get a spark show. Alright, so let's try this, and I'll give you some of my pros and cons of this welder. Let's see how she does. That actually went fairly well. Let's do some more. Just push the luck. I always get that little bit of balled up end off of it. So as thin as this material is, there's not a lot of need for a big heavy rod. Now if you're out doing fence repair where you need a thicker rod, well, let's see why it wouldn't do it. And hole. So I got a hole I got to repair here. Like I said, I'm not a stick welder. So I pushed the rod right through it on the second go there. So we had to fix that. Ooh, it's getting hot. It's getting hot up here. Let's see here. Well, other than looking like kind of like bird crap, you can see some inclusions there. So definitely need to work on that a little bit more. And then over here where I put the hole in it, but that's the welder, not the welder, right? So you're a better stick welder. Really, the only time I stick weld is on demos like this. That's about it. But I like the TIG a lot better. And the flux core, I don't think it did too bad job for a flux core. All right, some of the pros and cons with this system. Big pro, it'll MIG, TIG, and stick. You could take this out anywhere, and if you want to work on your vehicle, fences, outdoor work, that flux core is great. You got to worry about dragging a bottle around with you. A lot of strengths come with that. If you're putting floors in your vehicle, who really cares what the floors of the weld looks like? Clean it up, you're going to paint it, you're going to bury it. It's big for that. If you want to do some work, if you want to put some sheet metal in your dash, I mean, you could TIG weld that on real easy. No one says you can't. You just want to get some of this really thin, like an 045. Come here. Something like this 045 rod, and you could patch holes in your dash. You can make anything, custom tubing, stuff like that. Really, it's more your imagination than it is a welder. So the TIG, I wish there was a provision in here for a foot pedal, but if there was, then you're gonna have to raise its price up a little bit. So give and take. Now on the TIG, if it starts getting hot and you can tell you need to back off the heat a little bit, on this, you just gotta move faster. Where on a pedal, you can always back off a little bit, although you should be going faster as well. Now for the stick welder, where'd I put that? Here it is. My only complaint with the stick welder is that the stinger doesn't have a very good grooves in it to hold the rod. Now the stinger has got some very shallow grooves in it to hold. Now, if you're holding, 3/32, 1/8 inch, it's a little better, but it's nothing that really snaps in. So if I had any complaints, that's a big one for me, that it'll hold it, it'll do what you got to do, but it's also more about the person using it as well. If I stick weld it every day, it'd probably be a non-issue. But if you're learning, just keep in mind that it's there, right? Now this little inverter list on Amazon for about $129, but for $129 they have capability to flux core, MIG, stick, and lift TIG. That's big. All right, so I'll leave a link for this in the description below. But for the price, if you need to go to the Outback, get your big heavy extension cord, drag this thing out. You can stick weld, flux core. Now you're not going to weld 1/2 inch thick material with this, but if you're wanting to weld 1/8 inch, want to do some sheet metal work, stuff like that, I wouldn't hesitate for a second for using it for that. So check out that Yeswelder flux135pro. It's a nice machine for the money. And you'll see it being used a lot more on the channel because, well, that old truck's to get some floors in it here real soon. And there's always new projects. So I'll see you in the next project. Check out that Yeswelder. And if you want some help on settings, well, check these out. Thanks for viewing. Remember to please subscribe.